Today, here at about 13 before the hour, Dr. Roger Best joins us again, UCM President, in the studio to visit with us about what's going on at our university. And I hope you have something to talk about today, because it's been rather quiet around here for a while.
Not much going on, as I said last time, right? It's been pretty quiet at the university. It is quiet in the sense that we don't have students on campus.
Yeah.
We do have a few, pretty limited number. There are probably more in the community than people realize when we said we were going remote for both the rest of the spring and the summer, because we have so many of our students who live there in the summer. It's mostly our apartment complexes.
Yeah.
So it actually is nice to see some of our students out and about supporting the local community and being part of this community. But yeah, by and large, no student presence on campus, so it's very, very quiet when I go to work. We do have all of our employees back.
Yeah.
For the most part. A lot of our faculty haven't returned yet, since they're teaching remotely, and summer, many of them are not under contract in the summer. Yeah, it's quieter than usual for the summer.
It's quite an experience for everybody concerned with, not just the university, but just anybody living here in town or anywhere.
Yes.
It's a strange feel to the whole atmosphere.
It really is, and so tomorrow I'm hosting a virtual forum for our faculty and staff, and we allow our faculty staff to submit questions in advance. We'll have some real-time questions submitted tomorrow too, and you can tell even from the tone of the questions that the thoughts about what's happening, they're really all over the place, which makes our planning even more difficult. So very much concerned about whether shelter in place is being lifted too quickly, all the way to kind of I'm over this and it's not as bad as people are saying, and I'm ready to be back to normal. And so I think from a university perspective, we see that with our students and parents as well, that the spectrum of belief or thinking about what's been going on is very widespread. And so from our perspective, how you plan around that, plan through that is very challenging. And so what we've been trying to do is rely very heavily on certainly our local and state authorities and any mandates that they put forward to us, and the federal authorities as well. But absent any sort of actual mandate, we rely on CDC recommendations. So you'll hear us say very regularly the CDC recommends. They're not an enforcement body in the truest sense, and so we don't necessarily have the capability to enforce some of the recommendations, but we strongly encourage them, we recommend them, and one of those, for example, is wearing face masks. It's you look at medical providers, you look at the CDC, I'd say the preponderance at this point say that you should wear face masks, and particularly if you're in a closed setting for extended periods of time where you can't have social distancing. In this case, you and I are roughly 5-6 feet apart, right? So that's the recommended distance.
Yeah.
But in settings where that's not possible, which may be the traditional classroom setting, for example, or lab setting, the CDC has recommended wearing cloth face masks.
You will do that when school.
We will recommend that, and so we will strongly encourage that, recommend that, because we don't actually have any sort of mandate from our health authorities to require that.
You can't insist that somebody wears one.
Exactly, we can't enforce it.
Well, you can insist, but you can't enforce it.
Exactly, and there are a variety of reasons why a lot of the face mask requirements, for example, are challenging to implement, especially without just actual regulation or law in place. So for example, we did antibody testing on campus for our employees, thanks to Western Missouri Medical Center a week or two ago. So if you've already tested positive for the antibodies and you're comfortable that you're not able to catch the virus, so then should you have to wear a face mask, right? So there's debate about that. But that's a fairly simple case. It gets much more difficult. What happens if somebody has a medical reason they can't wear a mask? And now we prohibit them from coming to our classroom because they can't wear a mask. And now we get into some issues with law on the other side of this, where access to education, and we can't discriminate on the basis of, name a number of factors. Another one of those could be religious preference. I've not heard anybody express they have a religious preference against wearing masks, but if they were to express as such, we can't discriminate on the basis of religion. So it's a very challenging issue for us, where we're trying to balance health and safety of students, faculty, staff up against what we're actually allowed to do by law.
Have you had any conversations or maybe online meetings or whatever with Zoom with other universities about what everybody is going to do?
We try to track pretty closely what others are doing, both in the state and out. It's a little bit over in different spectrum, but a lot of commonality if you look at it. So about 70% of universities in the U.S. have announced they're going to have face-to-face in some capacity in the fall. So we're among that 70% or so. There are a percentage of the remainder that have said they're going to be fully online, and then there's a percentage of that that's left that have not announced what they're going to do because they don't know yet. So we're in the majority for sure going to a face-to-face environment. Most of them are saying similar things that we're saying. We recommend, we encourage face mask usage. We're going to provide social distancing in our classrooms. We're going to set up our events so that they're either capacity controlled from an invitation perspective, or we allow for social distancing. We have a board meeting that's this week. It's actually Thursday of this week. It'll be all-day board meetings, but we're going to set the room up. It's face-to-face this time. It's been Zoom the last few times. We're going to set it up so the chairs are spread out. We have distance among the board members. We have distance among our audience that's showing up for this. And we're also going to live stream as well so people can watch that. So there are some strategies like that we're going to put in play to recognize that we have to have some degree of physical presence potentially for some of the stuff we do, but there are ways we can design that to make it safer for or better for our students, faculty, staff, and sometimes safer. We have to be careful using that word. Really, some of it is comfort level too. So it may be very safe in a traditional format. We know people have been in close proximity to each other where one was sick and the other wasn't, and the other never got sick. So really, it's not even sometimes about safety as much as it's about comfort level. So how comfortable are you being in the presence of others and being close to others, and how can we design a learning environment or other activities where that distance is provided and allowed without whoever's participating feeling uncomfortable about that.
Now, your face-to-face meeting, as you called it, are 237B, but people who want to view are in 237, 234. Is that true? Is that the way that is?
So we have two different options there. So we do have, if you want to come and actually be in the union while we're having the meeting, so somewhat close in proximity to what we're doing, we're going to push the stream over to one of our other rooms.
It'll be streamed to that room.
Exactly.
Okay, I wondered how that was.
Or you can just watch it from a computer or laptop. The access is, if you just go through our website, you'll get to the access. So access is easy to get to. We just want to make sure we're able to provide a location for folks to go if they have trouble for whatever reason, don't have the right equipment, or have trouble getting access.
Okay. When does school start?
So officially, we're mid-August. I think the date is August 17th, if I remember that right. Yeah, so it's the Monday.
Now, do we have some of the athletic programs already with students back on campus getting ready for the year?
Yes, so football is already practicing.
The football team is here?
Yes, and so if you swing by the stadium or drive by certain times of the day, you'll see some activity going on there. We are following very closely what the NCAA allows for us to do and says we can do when it comes to various teams and practices. So for example, we're still not allowed to do in-person recruiting, so we can't go to a recruit's house and talk to them about coming to the university and being part of one of our athletics teams. That's still suspended through July 31st. But the NCAA has opened up the ability for universities to have football practice, and so we're doing some of that. You can do weight training, for example. So that's really where we've had a lot of engagement with our athletes. We're letting them do the weight training on a cycle. And anything you see outside really is controlled, and you'll find a lot of distancing happening there too.
We'll talk about, I always ask you this, but I gotta ask again, money.
Yes.
Are you really okay right now with finances because of the cuts the governor had to make?
Yeah, okay is probably a good word to use.
Well, I didn't know how to word that really.
We were, want to be pretty clear where we were able to be in the spring in spite of some of the extra costs we had because of COVID-19 and even some of the withholds that started happening early on. In total, the governor's office withheld $7 million from us for this fiscal year. It's about 13% of our state appropriations.
That's a lot of money.
That is a very, very big amount of money for us, and we're a nonprofit, so we don't try to hoard a lot of that cash that we get every year. We actually try to spend it on our students and our programs. So, and a lot of that is tied up in our salaries for the people that we hire to do this great work. So that's very challenging to manage through. We were very fortunate for this fiscal year that we didn't have to lay off anyone or eliminate any positions. That's not been true for next fiscal year, which starts July 1. So we did have to eliminate a few positions going into next year. In the context of the university, that's been limited, but for those individuals, that's high impact, obviously.
Yes,
There's a lot of
indeed.
concern about that, and for them personally. So what we are looking at for next year, we're looking at a fairly large deficit. We're gonna try to do a lot of reserve spending on that, so we have been fortunate. We've had good financial management over the years, and we do have enough reserves to help us manage through for a couple of years without making very, very drastic cuts. But even with that reserve spending, we're gonna have to make some reductions going into next year in our budget to try to get towards balanced budget. The board has approved doing that over 2 fiscal years. So if we were to look at next fiscal year, we're looking at about a $17 million deficit or so with all of the cuts that we've already had, but really the ones that we think will happen for next
Yeah.
year. And it could be even worse than that. We've not been told yet what our fiscal appropriations will be for next year from the state. The governor hasn't signed the budget. He's indicated to us in a couple of calls that it's not gonna be good. So we're really concerned about what will happen for next year, even beyond what we've already planned. So we expect to have to make some reductions, but we're trying to also at the same time not make the full extent of $17 million worth of reductions so that we can see what happens with enrollment as we move forward.
Yeah.
There's a lot of uncertainty there with students about whether they should come in the fall, rightly so, from a societal perspective. And so we want some of that to be able to settle out before we do anything unbelievably drastic when it comes to budget. But we'll still have to make some reductions to try to get closer to a balanced budget as we move into the next couple of fiscal years.
I just thought of something. What about the ACTs and the test that students usually take to qualify to go to a university? They don't have to do that now, do they?
For us, they have to if their GPA is below a certain level.
3.5.
Yeah, so we use 3.5
Yeah.
as a cutoff, and we'll keep evaluating that. We actually had already had it in our strategic plan to go to a test optional approach over the next couple of years. So we were gonna do it a little more methodically than we ended up doing it. But with everything shutting down in the spring, we realized a lot of students didn't even have access to testing centers.
Right.
So we went ahead and implemented that for the fall semester. We accelerated it by a year compared to what we were actually planning to do. And we put the 3.5 as a cutoff. So if you have a 3.5 or higher, you don't actually have to take the ACT or the SAT, except in certain circumstances. There are certain programs that, from an accreditation perspective, that require ACT scores. So we'll continue to do those. But a percentage of our students, that's not
Yeah.
the majority for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
And again, we'll continue to evaluate whether 3.5 is the right number as we move forward. What we've discovered is that there's a very strong correlation between your high school GPA and your success rate in college. Less of a correlation between your ACT score and your success rate in college.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the test designers tell you that the only thing those tests are really supposed to predict is your first semester success. But we're finding that the high school GPA does well with that and beyond.
Yeah.
So there's a very large correlation between your high school GPA and your ability to succeed and graduate with a college degree.
It doesn't apply to athletics, though. Does
So
it?
that's where the NCAA starts coming in, right? So we have
Yeah.
to, certain, whether it's athletics or a couple of our academic programs, because of mandates from others, we still have to implement that. I think the NCAA will be one of those that will change that at some
Yeah.
point. One of the concerns we have too, when you start looking at some of the studies, it's our standardized tests biased against certain races, ethnicities, right? So we do see that there's a variation in scores when it comes based on race and ethnicity, and that fundamentally creates a problem when we start talking about college access. And so I think the NCAA will reconsider that stance as we move forward. I don't speak for them on their behalf. We're a member institution, so I get to vote on these types of recommendations. But it's one of those things that so many universities now are really questioning the value of a standardized exam to get you into the door. When you look at the demographics and the variation of scores within those demographics, it really causes us to pause and rethink whether we should have an entrance exam that might discriminate against individuals on certain characteristics like that.
Yeah. You think we've survived pretty good through this pandemic so far?
So far, I think we've done well. Our retention rates have held up pretty well. Our summer enrollment's been good. In fact,
Was it as good as normal?
We were about equal to where we were last year,
Okay.
actually. And our typical summer is about 60–70% online classes and then some internships and other face-to-face types of classes. This summer, they're all online, and so we thought we might take a little bit of a reduction in enrollment, but we're roughly equivalent to where we were last summer. We were within 98% or so, I think, of last summer.
So when school begins in the fall, 10,000 students, 11,000?
So right now we're tracking about 8% fewer head count. So we were about 11.5 in the spring, 11.3 or so,
Okay,
11.2
okay.
in the fall. So we're looking at being somewhere between 5 to 10% less than that, potentially, in head count. We won't really know until people show up.
Yeah.
We're tracking about 11.6% lower in credit hours. So that's really the measure of engagement and whether students are going to be here. And we think some of them are. That's actually, it trended worse over the last few weeks. Now it's trending a little better. So we were forecasting about a 12% reduction in credit hours for next year, just based on the uncertainty and some other factors. And that's a little bit less than 12% right now compared to last fall. So we should still be above 10,000 head count. We anticipate definitely being above that. We just don't know where that settled number is. We think it could be 10.5, but if things change a little bit over the next few weeks, we could be back to 11.
Okay, anything we haven't talked about that you want to mention today?
I do want to express appreciation for our faculty and staff. They've really done an unbelievable job as we transition very quickly to both online coursework, but even lack of face-to-face engagement on campus. We went virtual all across campus, and people had to work from home in other places besides campus. And yet we had some essential employees who still had to be there to manage our facilities and take care of the place and do some of our services. Great job they did over spring, and I know it's tough reversing that and starting to come back to work and trying to figure out whether it's the right time, not the right time, and so I appreciate that everyone's really been very positive to the extent that's possible in this type of environment. So a lot of kudos to the people I work with. They've done a great job, and so I'm very fortunate to be there, and just happen to be in this position, but fortunate to be one of the members of the University of Central Missouri.
Thanks for coming today.
Appreciate your having me.
Be here next month.
I look forward to it.
Okay. Dr. Roger Best, President at UCM, guesting with us on Johnson County today. Thank you, sir.